So let's start with the question.
I have a question that someone asked me to ask. So in the situation in which an experience of the body causes the mind to become distraught,
So what?
In a situation in which an experience of the body causes the mind to become distraught, isn't this an example of the body having more power over the mind? And if that is the case, does this refute that the mind is more powerful than the body?
Lycklig nhâm là tên này, lycklig nhâm là tên này, xem thì đều mẹ bảo chỉ kêu gì nữa, 아니 그래서 근데 또 tem 이거다 lycklig 이기는 게 lycklig stämmer shukcha så det ju bara 아니 tänker jag halvvägs innan 아니 kalsa utan sen till kalsa så då vet ju chavatte jubati 아니 back to halvvägs. Could you read the question once more, please?
In the situation in which an experience of the body causes the mind to become distraught,
Yeah, okay.
isn't this an example of the body having more power over the mind? And if so, doesn't this refute that the mind is more powerful than the body?
Cấp chỉ là lưu là nhầm nhau cái đó cái mà số thu này điều này xem thì đều mèo xem mà kêu là này xem chụp là số thì survey đi nè anh đọc về chụp cho xem năng để tal lưu đọc về chụp cho và xem để đọc về chụp mà như vậy thì cái họ về
the unity completion in the using here in unity to one assembly to each other in assembly to and really to yeah each other children unity unity KG is simple reality here yes and sempre lesa yes dan pina ani kare sure lesa ni go ngi ni asungi listu le veto biarba
le kare
le
ba
ni asungi today that to be to caresen some jewelry to biarba that teacher now assembly to the tenny they go to the to the tenny really to the teacher but he is an assembly to chase then really to the assembly to the picture and As you look at the number that they can similar to a meta, semi I get me a in a Sunday, they get by to get this, but children have a case, and to send you the Sunday, and shot any Lady shot there. Sunday, region, a Jenny, and a yeesh, whatever, yee, Gawati, ya pay me. That is, I can miss what I have to tell. But I'm managing the virgin. Sarah, chicken, I love the virgin. Then, the Tasun Subama, Tasun Subama, the jazz in the and so that not on the church of a complete cheap. Chicken, really the same kind of much. The teenage started in the job to get the children have a case. Oh, the Kange Chinese, simply Kange Chinese. You Kange Chinese, DG, some DG has. The come, Gashi places that you Kange change something. What is supposed to be out of the heart?
Then it Kapatilla in some way to Naz and tell Luby to Naz.
I'm going to ship it.
Because is Lula Miguel and then we to Naz.
I didn't do Quran. Simple relative to work. Simple Lena, Montutan, so beautiful. Simple relative is to work. Beautiful. I'm going to ship it. Simple relative, simple relative to honor. And beauty, yes, beauty, to work here. The inside Tambu to simple relative. Simple relative to kill. You to the kid could work here. You simple relative to kill. But what do we have? The negative can't change to young. Similar to the way you will get it. But in
So the example that was given suggested that the body has the ability to have an effect on the mind, a negative effect on the mind by experiencing some favorable experience. That's not being denied. The idea that the body can have influence on the mind is acknowledged, has been acknowledged. The point is that it's not necessarily the case that every time you have an unfavorable experience, that it must therefore have a harmful effect on the mind. That's not definite. It does occur, but it doesn't always occur. It doesn't have to occur. So one way to think of it is that another sort of broader way to think of it is that whatever happens to the body, whatever happens to our physical form, is largely a result of our prior karma. That karma, the ultimate source of karma, is mental. Some thought. Sembe le semba is the volition, which is the underlying cause for physical deeds and verbal deeds. So when we engage in non-virtuous, serious non-virtuous verbal or physical deeds based on non-virtuous volition, then the result of that can be to be reborn in the hells, for instance, where the great physical suffering of that life form has to be experienced. And so the ultimate cause for that kind of painful experience comes from the mind. The reverse of it is that when we are able to be reborn as human beings and have favorable rebirth, same thing, that consequence or that circumstance is due to some prior virtuous volition that prompted a virtuous act, typically physical or verbal virtuous act. That's the primary cause for being reborn as a human being. So that description is meant to, in a broader sense, or in a more long-term sense, showing how the mind has a governing effect over our physical being. And so, similarly, the karma that the mind initially generated to produce that kind of rebirth, if and when that karma is exhausted or runs its course, then that physical form also will disappear, come to an end. So that's kind of a larger way of understanding how the mind is more significant than our given physical experiences rather than the other way around. But the general point that was being discussed in the morning was, and even yesterday, was that each one, between the body and the mind, each one can have either a favorable or an adverse effect on the other. But in a more stronger sense, the mind is more absolute in the way that it has a certain effect, not certain as in possible, but certain as a definite effect on the body, as the example of developing compassion and so on can lead to ease, great ease, physical ease, to bring about a state of physical ease directly from having developed those mental qualities. On the other hand, the reverse of that is that even if a person is physically harmed, and so there are cases where practitioners, there is a story of a famous, one of the jatakas of Shantideva, who was bodhisattva, the Buddha in a prior life, and he was a practitioner in the forest, and some of the king's harem happened upon him, and he met him, and the king became jealous when he encountered the queens there, so he took out his wrath on the yogi that was practicing in the forest and cut his body up. But as the Jataka suggests, even though his body was being harmed by being cut apart, that it did not prevent him from maintaining his patience, for which he was famous, part of why he was called the one who was a teacher of patience. And so he was able to maintain the ease and the calm and the equanimity that patience can provide, even while his body was being destroyed. And there are other passages which talk about that even if every time a sun is a measure of weight, and so even every morsel or every ounce of your flesh, if it's being cut off ounce by ounce, that every time an ounce of flesh is being cut off, your skin or your body, your flesh, then for bodhisattvas that have mastered patience, that form of harm can in fact do nothing but enhance the ease that the Bodhisattva is able to maintain. So this example is given to indicate that physical harm is not necessarily able to affect the mind and alter the mind. It's a harmful effect. It's not necessary that it will have a harmful effect on the mind. But the opposite is more, the effect is more certain, the reverse way. Positive minds can always can have a favorable effect on the body.
This time people are really going to the should change it. Should change it. Really can't reality. Some people are doing it. Some people top charity, could be a GBR. Some issues in the Yamari.
As I said,
Jarijatus. What did you get to say? Luna Kamish with Yarba. Yabit the same Shumumas and Payatan.
You can think of then martial arts or boxers who are in a ring together and they're beating each other up and doing great harm. What would normally be great harm to one another, or maybe it's harmful to them during the course of their match. But by the strength of their mind, they don't allow that physical, damage to overcome their, determination to continue fighting. That's another example.
There's a same story. Same shoes nothing called leading should be child.
But if your mind is affected adversely, that has a virtually certain effect on the body and body's condition.
Algebra, Dorte, Kevasheva, Venturas, Liberty Carrete,
Cesov la Takiovace. Cesov la Takiovace. Because you don't make sure that it's real.
Don't get it back. Algebra, Dortenda, Jara, a job is to do it back. Dortenda, Kevasheva, Ambula, Ambuli, Tende, Chanted Palapa churches. Ne Tomar Rangi Kumi Shire, Tap Namla, Muslim to Tome, Tap Namla, Muslim to Tome Chetu. Joining the Kumba Jabarite, Sinje, Tamje, Tuneshwara Shire, Soji, Vichel, Tabata, Tabe Jume, Tunetan, Ane, Tunetan, He Gobe, Gotentan. He took them. They do get Punji, Namik, both through a Yina, Chindi Malo, but a chair, shape of Kali chairs. That is the Tadi Tended Transituna Bachi, the article Transituna Bachi, Didn't Toma Rani Puneshire, Tab Namla, moving to Tome Chipu, Tabji, Genshin Chipu, Tome Chipu. Many Joani Degi, Congajabariti, Joani, that Joani begins the Dugasina, Gate Home and Dugasina, and Dugasia to Punja. But and I get a tea, get to do that tea, I couldn't check. And it couldn't do that. So I need to the way. So I need this. Tapti in the Dingy. So I need 뭔가 제가 이때 선제 탐제 중에 뭔가 시대 저기 딱 선제 탐제 중에 뭔가 시대 뭔가 시대 단지 그만큼 좀 무슨 전주 선발과 어디에서 내디 단지들이 좋아하게
So now, well, the morning session, we came to the end of the section that dealt with the topic of the epithet of being the one who desires of benefiting the world, which took us up to, I think it was verse 131, somewhere along those lines. Looked a couple verses through the week. So now the next verse, which by my numbering is verse 132, marks the beginning of the next epithet, which is the Buddha as a teacher. And as we noted in an earlier session, that epithet is one in which the name of the result, meaning the result of becoming an enlightened being who is able to teach the path, that word, namely the teacher, is being used to refer metaphorically to the wisdom, which is the cause for becoming such a teacher. So the second epithet is the epithet of the teacher, and it's meant to identify the second causal quality, which is namely the wisdom that precedes selflessness directly. So this is at the beginning of verse 132, I said, right? 132. And I don't have English in front of me, but it's, so the verse says something along the lines of the compassionate one, right? The person who possesses compassion, applies himself or herself to the means of that will to the means, meaning the elements of the path, the practice, for the sake of or in order to destroy suffering. That's the first half of verse 132. And then the second half of the verse says that if one, the reason for that is that if one is not able to know, to recognize, or not in the sense that doesn't have the knowledge, doesn't have the realization of, then the word tabjung, there's a word tab which means, tabjung is a different form of the same word, and it actually means the goal. So tabjung is tabjung, and the so, or the result in this case, and the Gyu is the cause. So that is, if one is not aware of the results and their causes, and that's understood to refer to the Four Noble Truths. The results are the truth of suffering and the truth of cessation. Causes are the truth of origination and the truth of path, respectively. So if one does not have knowledge of those, then one is unable to teach them to others. And so one cannot attain the ultimate result of being an enlightened person unless one cultivates the knowledge, the wisdom that is meant by the term teacher by developing this realization. Because this is the verse, the initial verse, and this is kind of a brief statement of the subject, the second subject, which is the ideal form of practice, which is to cultivate wisdom. So the way that the commentator did was so beautiful that it weaves in the words of this verse in the following manner. So it says, the word which says the compassionate one. Okay? The word compassionate one is identified to mean specifically the bodhisattva who has achieved the second path, the path of preparation. The one that bodhisattva has not yet perceived reality directly. So that person must apply himself, that Bodhisattva must apply himself initially to the means that will, first of all, quell or eliminate his own suffering, right? And then having perceived those methods directly, then using the two kinds of application that were mentioned, the two kinds of effort, then just as compassion needs to be cultivated repeatedly, then wisdom also has to be cultivated repeatedly in order to develop to the point where one not only is able to destroy his or her own suffering, but also achieves the enlightenment, which will enable that individual to destroy the suffering of all sentient beings, which is his stated aim, right? Which is what his first epithet is all about. So he needs to cultivate wisdom if he wants to fulfill the aim of his compassion. And it says you must do that because that bodhisattva is a sokye. Sokye means sosokyo means a non-Arya. So he's a person of the second path, path of preparation. Path of preparation has not seen reality and nor destroyed any, in a permanent way, any element of suffering or its causes. So because he is that non-Arya, therefore he must apply himself to cultivate wisdom and in the manner that was described. All right, and then it says, Chavartalis, that argument is definitely true. Right? The argument has been asserted, and if that reason is in fact probative, right? It is in fact a valid reason, because then it says tabjum. Tabjum means the result in this case. Without knowledge, one remains ignorant of the true nature of the result, meaning samsaric result of suffering, and the spiritual result of the truth of cessation. And if one remains ignorant of the causes of those two results, namely the result or the cause of samsaric suffering is the origination, and the cause of cessation is the truth of the path. So both the two of to remain, if they remain hidden to him, means that he does not know them, then he or she will not have the ability. It says it will be difficult, literally it will be difficult for someone to teach them to somebody else. How can you teach them to somebody else if you haven't realized it yet yourself even? So then it says, and it says, difficult to teach them. Be difficult for you. Difficult is meant, it's a euphemism for saying impossible. Right? Difficult in the sense of you'll be unable to teach them. And here it doesn't mean that you can't teach them, but you can't teach them in a perfect and unerring way.
다들 잘도 주는 것들이 대시 좋아하는 조건에 대시 무슨 것도 배치도 공부해야 나도 무슨 것도 해야 말이야. 대시 무슨 것도 마음을 가리려서는 아니 대시 때문에 그거네 주제들이 지다와신 제발라 이 대시 무슨 것도 이해. 무슨 것도 마도나 주제들이 지다와신 지는 그야 말이야. 이에서는 그것도 주어내니까 무슨 것도 이해. 여기에서 무슨 것도 배타면 저러 대시 이 인간에서는 그 아니 잔주된 것들 주제들이 지다와신 주제 담바다 제발라 주제들이 지다와신 제국이 이 제발라 이제 된데 들어가는 것도 주나 지다와신 무슨 것도 제가 당근 무슨 것도 같이 또 배치고 좋아하는 게 누군 것이 예시.
So, just to clarify again, what the verse is saying is slightly using slightly different points, then the aim of the Bodhisattva at this stage remains the aim that is embodied in his or her compassion. The aim is to save all sentient beings, draw them out of their condition of suffering, to lead them away from their suffering, by teaching them unerringly the means by which that can be done. And that's understood to be to teach the nature of the Four Noble Truths. That's the method that taught here in this treatise. That's the main path. That's the whole chapter is focused on the nature of the Four Noble Truths, but to understand them and to practice. So saying, the Bodhisattva has not even perceived those Four Noble Truths directly, therefore the causal aspect of the Four Noble Truths, number 1, number 2, and number 4, and the resultant aspects of the Four Noble Truths, namely number 1 and number 3, if they remain hidden to him means he has not yet perceived them directly, and then achieve the ability to eliminate his own suffering or her own suffering, how could he ever hope to do what his ultimate aim is, which is to teach that same method unerringly to others? So therefore, it's necessary for someone who has that aim not only to have that desire to save all sentient beings, but he or she must also apply himself. That's what the verb of the verse is, apply himself to the methods that will enable him to overcome that ignorance that he still is subject to. So then the apply yourself in the commentary is understood to be to exercise the 2 necessary forms of effort. The effort of recognizing the importance of the practice that will initiate effort, and then the effort which is to apply yourself continually in order to make certain progress. And then Rinpoche also noted that the nature of effort is crucial, but effort has its own source, effort has its own cause, and its own cause is aspiration. Aspiration is also a mental factor. So aspiration comes from recognizing the value of doing something correctly. The recognizing the value of doing something correctly is actually a form of faith, a form of realizing it's possible to end suffering. You can understand what the nature of suffering is, and that it's possible to eliminate that suffering. That recognizing that is the nature of samsara and the possibility of achieving liberation. Knowing that and seeing that generates a kind of faith. Oh, it's possible for me to achieve in life. When you have that faith, then you will have aspiration. If I can achieve it, then I should seek it. Then if you have the aspiration to seek it, then that will give you the impetus to apply yourself. So that's a very crucial understanding of the process as well.
대시 제주되는 메달을 주주야 중에들의 제주시 아니 남대기 제주시 아니 군주 제주시 어떤 남대기 제주시 그래서 다 제주 주주 비슷한 아니 그래서 그래서 메달에서 주주 대기经济区多个人，现在全部第一，经济区多个人，现在全部第一。其他小人那个讲看，今年这个东面就是，小人那个落地了东面写的是的，其他小人那个讲看，今年这个东面就是东面写的是。经济到哪里个东西就是小人那些，现在是其他，所以那样一个是经济的东西这里呀， Jesus cannot teaches our Naman Nia. So long in the suit that teaches our Nasi here. Other the day, Metala so to get Babalana. Sena Chamatini, Yesu, Ilas. That day she Metala to teach you to talk at the Layasi to that. But we teach you to talk by each other. Only to my picture. Just and the 7 hour junk in Tommy Shiva said. We did the Mandela Tony to the Lobsang City. 7 hours. That day, you talk at the Senate to Matini US at the Jujis, Senna. Jujis are now at Jujis, now it's Misha. So I'm going to Jujis or Nasi, 3 Juji. 2 years in the town, you Jujis or Nas. Jujila Senna to Search. Jujila,
Komju catches it. Komju the guy to the Senna, the self person.
That's all I'm going to do. Jujila Senna to see. So I'm going to do. Jujila Senna much in the jail. Juji to get over the line. Jujila Senna to Matini. Juji. Lion, Senna to Matini. Jula. Juji Senna Timberline. Juji the Senna Timber dear, Medala to Jula. Juji the Senna Timber Lion. Juji thinking as in here is. Teaches in as English. Never so. Not of the Tulas that you will teach years, but that Jidan says Jidan still an answer. Don't make sure that that's energy goes together.
Jidan,
he says that Jijita Mandela Toyata, Sana, so Nasa. As the Jijita Jenna Toyata. Teaches the Naman Nis, the difficult Jijis and I use it.
So don't be like
Near Jida.
Then there's the same case, same as this Chumzeba, Chumzeba, some give you Masimbe, Teaching of Garsa, District. Sergei Masina, I transit from
that we could change it on it. Very chubby. Did you go near to the changes of very chubby?
Sergei Masiba, you know, that charges my So then there are several lines in commentary which are focusing on what are the essential qualities of the Bodhisattva who has reached the second path, the so-called path of preparation. So it says, Jansen Doramba Yang. So it's furthermore, that Bodhisattva who has reached the path of preparation is somebody who has established on the basis of inferential reasoning, established the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. So in the following verse 133, and 133 towards the end, let's see, the second line, Kyavargi means characteristic. Kyavargi. Those characteristics are understood to refer to the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. Those characteristics, they examine the Noble Truth by means of their characteristics. So their characteristics are that the truth of suffering has 4 characteristics, the truth of origination has 4 characteristics, and so on, for the truth of cessation of the past. So they're referred to as Mitak So Chudru. Mitak means impermanence. Permanence is first of the 4 attributes or characteristics of truth of suffering. Mitak So Chudru means the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truth which are made up of impermanence and the rest. So those are what are being investigated by the bodhisattva who's achieved the path of preparation. And he or she is someone who has established on the basis of intellectual reasoning correctly what the meaning of those 16 aspects are, and then meditates on them. And meditating on them, it says, because that practitioner has not yet achieved direct realization, it says, Dönchi Tsulvi Tok. Dönchi means the concept. A concept grasps the nature of its object through what's called Dönchi. Dönchi refers to a kind of mental image. So you don't perceive the actual impermanence, you perceive a mental image of impermanence. And that mental image is the means by which you grasp the meaning of impermanence. So a correct inferential realization of those 16 aspects involves that kind of mental image. That mental image is conceptual in nature. Your aim is to gain the direct realization of those 16 aspects. So to go from a correct inferential knowledge to the direct yogic perception of the Four Noble Truths is what occurs on the path of preparation. So that awareness, that realization that you have, then there's another term in the commentary that says Selnam. Selnam means clear appearance. Literally means a clear appearance of the object. That's an epistemological phrase or expression. And that expression, in its general sense, refers to direct perception. Because in direct perception, the object appears clearly to the mind. And so therefore, if there is the quality of clear appearance to the mind, then that's, in the general sense of that term, identifying that object as a conceptual, as a direct perception. Okay. The interesting thing here is that quality of clarity of appearance, which generally is the meaning of direct perception, is being used in relation to conceptual understanding. So what it's saying is that conceptual understanding that you have, correct inferential conceptual understanding, as you begin to meditate on it, it begins to develop more of a clarity to it that is approaching the nature of direct perception. So that method of understanding the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths has two qualities to it before you achieve direct perception. You have one in which you perceive the 16 aspects through mental images that don't have any of that clarity of appearance to them. Or, as you begin to practice it continually, begins to develop some form, some element of that clear appearance to it that is still conceptual. So both of these occur on the path of preparation as you progress towards direct realization. That's one. So then, even if you have, so that's an important distinction for what we're talking about, the bodhisattva who's practicing the path of preparation, how to understand the nature of his or her understanding and awareness prior to achieving direct realization. Then in addition to that, you can be someone who has the inferential realization of the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, right, which is a kind of wisdom, a conceptual wisdom. And then with that conceptual wisdom, as you meditate on the path of preparation and begins to develop that quality of clarity, clear appearance, as it begins to take on that quality, then you can also have that knowledge, that level of knowledge, with or without bodhicitta. It can be supported by bodhicitta or not supported by bodhicitta. But in the case of a bodhisattva, it must be supported by bodhicitta. And then, as he or she is practicing, it has, to a greater or lesser degree, that conceptual understanding begins to develop some kind of clarity. Initially, it has little or no clarity. For instance, on the path prior to the path of preparation, path of accumulation, you can have correct inferential knowledge of the Four Noble Truths, but you don't have shamatha or vipassana, so there's no clarity to that inferential understanding. So these are sort of important elements of the practitioner's mind as he or she is cultivating the path towards ultimately gaining the transcendent path of esteem.
That is
No, sir.
that
So we're talking about that kind of bodhisattva who has reached the path of preparation, who is beginning to develop the quality of clarity in his or her understanding of the 16 aspects of Four Noble Truth. That's who we're talking about when we use the second epithet as the second causal element that's essential to becoming enlightened, becoming an ultimate authority.
That is
Yes.
it is a when taring when susu amainega amati nyamachi komberwa tone taji amati change
Yes.
General the Karisha, the Amagi Nyamagi Lord shot with Yatin. Nyamati Amati Nusquia Marva. Takas took chains yet Nyamagi Rang Lola shot Devagi Amachiava Lola Sharra Amati put to Jiri. Lola shot Amati. Amune marba. Oti tan jene amati tikia. Tiji pran da jene. Neti amati tikia. Amati tiji tishai. Amati leti yes. Loli tishai tuga. Amati tishai. Mushum. Amamushum tu tuni amari. Amati leti labati leti. If you cut out the Namjuji down to the Jews, and the Chicago. If you tell it, Lola shall repeal it to Jissy. Around Green and Amatin here.
So when we're talking about a conceptual understanding of the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, that's a phrase to describe that is called Dönchi Tu Vitok. Dönchi Tu Vitok means to realize all those 16 aspects by way of or through the medium of what's called Dönchi. And Dönchi, what I'm saying, is a mental image. Dön literally means meaning. Chi means something general. So that how that term came about, or put aside for the moment. So, what is a Dönchi? What is a so-called mental image? What I call mental image. There's a better word for it. A simple example. We all, not necessarily, but typically we all knew our mother. We spent time with our mother directly when we were living with our mother at same home, and we interacted with her, saw her, listened to her, had experiences with her. Then let's say that you move, or you're living at a distance where she's not directly evident to you. You're not able to see her. In that situation, if you turn your mind to your mother, then how do you think about your mother? You think about your mother through so-called mental images. So your past experience will allow you to call to mind some almost, it can be a visual image, it can be what you look like, but it's not limited to that. It can be anything about the experience associated with your mother that you recall. And then in your mind, that's how you think about your mother. Now that's not your mother, that's ideas that relate to your mother. But the way conceptual thinking works is it suspends the idea that this is just a mental image, and you think about that as if it were your mother. And so that's how mental images operate, and that's how we think conceptually. The images that we form in our mind, we give them the status of the things that we're thinking about, even though they aren't those things. So what we call that's okay. So so conceptual thinking. No. So conceptual, all forms of conceptual thinking are in a certain sense erring. They're erring in the way in which we relate to these mental images. So for instance, every form of recollection that we have when we recall something or we're reflecting about something and we are using recollection to call it to mind, all of those forms of recollection are forms of conceptual thinking in the sense that we are evoking some kind of mental image, not necessarily a visual image, but a mental image. It can be an idea, it could be, it can be, what's the word? It can have meaning content rather than visual content, for example. But the nature of it is that type of thinking is one in which they use the word Jampa. Jampa means to grasp, to believe something, to hold something. So it's cognitive in sense, in its meaning, and it often is a wrong way of believing. So what you're believing is you're holding that mental image as if it were the thing that is the mental image of. It's not your mother, but you're thinking of that image and interacting with it in your mind as you think about it, as if it were your mother. So that's the Jampa, is that you're acting as if you believe that mental image to be your mother, when obviously it isn't. So we had the term clear appearance, Salnam, and the first point of about is it's a quality that is generally associated with direct perception. But we use that expression to refer to the process by which conceptual understandings take on more and more clarity as you meditate on it during the path of so-called path of preparation. So the phrase, there is another word added to it. Selnam Tön. Selnam Tön means to elicit that quality of clarity. You elicit the quality of clarity as you meditate on vipassana in combination with shamatha, and then that wisdom, as that wisdom becomes stronger, then that realization of the conceptual understanding of 16 aspects of Four Noble Truths take on greater clarity, and you are cultivating what is called the wisdom born of meditation. The wisdom born of meditation does not begin until you achieve the path of preparation. So prior to that, during the path of accumulation, you can learn about the Four Noble Truths. You can develop listening wisdom. You can even develop the wisdom born of reflection, but not the wisdom born of meditation. The wisdom born of meditation, only the beginning point for the wisdom born of meditation is after you achieve shine, that one a form of one-pointed concept. So you have, first of all, you have to have correct conceptual understanding, inferential understanding of the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths before you meditate on at all, one-pointedly or with wisdom. So that's before you start that marks the attainment of the wisdom born of reflection. When you attain the valid wisdom born of reflection, then you have the raw material for which to cultivate shamatha in relation to that correct conceptual understanding. When you develop one-pointed shamatha in relation to that correct conceptual understanding of the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, then you reach the point where you're ready to develop the wisdom born of meditation, which is that shamatha gives your mind a clarity from its one-pointed nature that enables your wisdom to see things more clearly. And so then as you begin to cultivate vipassana on the platform of shamatha, then you begin to elicit selnam terma. You begin to develop that clear appearance in relation to those 16 aspects, and that process becomes more and more refined and culminates with, in fact, the direct realization of those Four Noble Truths. So this mental image that is the main object when you understand things conceptually can have a greater or lesser degree of clarity to it. You want more clarity. You want complete clarity, the clarity of direct realization. But even when it's still conceptual, it can have more or less clarity to it. A simple example, when you're recalling your mother. So if you haven't seen your mother for a very long time, then your ability to recall her you may think like, oh, I'm forgetting my mother. I don't remember or my grandmother, shall we say. I can't remember the way she was, the way I could at an earlier time. So that kind of expression, that kind of description is indicative of the fact that your mental image can have a greater or lesser degree of clarity. And that in a general sense. So, for example, if you listen to a teaching on the Four Noble Truths, and it's a good teaching, and you understand it pretty clearly, something that's been taught to you. Well, if your conceptual understanding of that teaching remains clear, then if you had to explain it to somebody else, you'd be able to do so with some ease. But if some amount of time has gone by, or if your understanding of it is not that clear, then the best you can do is give some vague approximation of what the meaning is. So the less clarity there is to your understanding, your conceptual understanding, the less you're able to give some explanation of it to somebody else. And that also helps convey the idea of clarity as associated with a mental image. So then this little passage, the 2 or 3 lines of the commentary, identifies these crucial elements of what it is that identifies the nature of a bodhisattva who has achieved the path of preparation. One first thing is that the person has a correct conceptual understanding of the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. Second thing is that he has achieved shine, he's achieved shamatha, and is able to engage vipassana in combination with that shamatha, and therefore that mental image is beginning to develop that clarity that one needs to evoke. And thirdly, that person's practice must be so that when that person is practicing, meditating on the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, at that time, he or she is not thinking about bodhicitta. You can't think about the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths and be thinking about your aspiration to enlightenment at the same time. Nevertheless, if you have very strong bodhicitta, then by maintaining that as your motivation, then that motivation will suffuse your practice. And so you would say, Chanjupi Simpi Simba. Simba means under the influence of. Your practice remains under the influence of bodhicitta. So if you have not developed bodhicitta and you're not able to keep that as your motivation, then your understanding of the 16 Noble Truths won't be supported or influenced or under the color of bodhicitta. But in order to be a bodhisattva of the path of preparation, it must have that characteristic as well. So these are all the essential elements of what it means to be a bodhisattva of the path of preparation. So further clarification, which is not explicitly in the text, but will help you to understand. Further is saying that prior to the path of preparation, talking about a person who's achieved the path of preparation, prior to the path of preparation, then on a Mahayana path, you are a bodhisattva. Your practice is under the influence. It is under the color of bodhicitta. You can very well have attained a realization of the Four Noble Truths or a realization of emptiness. You have that wisdom. It might even be a correct inferential understanding of wisdom. You may have realized wisdom to that degree and have that kind of correct conceptual knowledge. And because it's conceptual, then you will have a mental image. You will perceive that emptiness or the Four Noble Truths by means of that mental image of what that meaning stands for. But that conceptual image doesn't have the clarity that it would have if you had achieved shamatha with that understanding and were beginning to develop clarity by practicing vipassana in connection with it. So you can have a correct realization of the Four Noble Truths even on the path of accumulation. You can correctly even teach it to others. But you do not have the kind of clarity of understanding that the person who has achieved shamatha and is meditating on it in using vipassana in combination with that shamatha, you have not yet achieved that level of clear understanding. So then what we have just been discussing is that sort of brief overview of what the Bodhisattva who has achieved the path of preparation, what the qualities are that such a spiritual being possesses. And such a spiritual being is in fact the person whom we can refer to by the second epithet of, quote, teacher. When we're saying what we mean is person who has achieved, who is, and I'm sorry, tapi kalau saya jelasin dulu berarti, kalau saya tempe kecil di dalam top yang mana, orang macam berarti, kalau ikut tempe di, so the person on the path of preparation is the person who is striving to gain the quality of being deserving to be referred to by the epithet of teacher, which is not acquired until he or she achieves path of esteem. But this person is the person whose practice is directed towards gaining that quality. So then this next, having given the introduction to what that type of practitioner is, then the next verse 133, I think, is then in the outline it says there are three parts to it. What are the methods by which one investigates what is to be abandoned? What is to be abandoned is generally truth of cessation. I'm sorry, the truth of origination, truth of suffering. And the second one is the method by which one examines the antidote. So the antidote is generally the truth of the path. And then the third one is then what is the purpose for engaging in those two kinds of examination. So we're starting the first one, which is what is the method of examining the object to be abandoned. And between the suffering and origination, mainly seem to be abandoned is the truth of origination. So then this subject that is now identified as what the next verse is describing, it says, says the way it's presented in the commentary is, it's not the case that there isn't a correct way to investigate or practice the true nature of the Four Noble Truths. Why? Because the next verse tells you what that method is. So it says, in the verse it says, one is an examiner, one is an investigative practitioner. Then namjava. Namjava means one who is engaged in the act of investigating. I'm not sure what the English translation said. But then one is an investigator who uses reasoning and scripture to investigate the nature of the Four Noble Truths and truth of ordination in particular. So it says initially one investigates on the basis of scriptural passages. And so that's identified as the process by which you first begin to hear instruction based on the Buddha's teaching from a teacher. And that form of wisdom represents the wisdom born of listening. That form of wisdom can correctly understand the meaning of emptiness or any element of the Four Noble Truths. And so one can say you realize the Four Noble Truths, but doesn't rise to the level of inferential knowledge. It's a realization in the sense that it's a correct understanding, it's a correct belief, it can be a correct belief. So that kind of wisdom is what is understood to mean that you investigate on the basis of scripture. Then, having developed fully that listening wisdom, you have gained enough scriptural knowledge of the nature of the instruction about the subject matter. Then you have to apply your reasoning powers in order to develop a more refined, correct, inferential understanding on the basis of reason. And then if you develop that, then you develop a second level of wisdom, which is the wisdom born of reflection. And so you are one who investigates the subject matter on the basis of scripture and reasoning to cultivate those or develop those two forms of reasoning. Those two forms of understanding, and those are the methods, right, that are necessary to engage in order to carry out the practice that will enable you to learn about the Four Noble Truths. So it's not the case that there isn't a method for doing it, because the method is to develop listening wisdom and then develop wisdom born from reflection.
그냥 조남기 20일 토비아를 가르거리스는 주주가 쓰기. 그 조남기는 주주가 특이해요. 이게 아까 무슨 뜻도 아야말라. 한 조남바디 무슨 뜻이 지금까 되어지기가. 다시 조남기 솔직히 터득이 됐다. 주주가 선주님 좀 대스게 할수 있지만.
So the reason that the treatise, the lines from the treatise are making reference to the necessity to practice, to develop wisdom born of listening and wisdom born of reflection is because without those, in the absence of those, it's impossible to become a bodhisattva who's reached the path of preparation. Path of preparation, in order to achieve the path of preparation, you have to achieve shamatha in relation to the object that is the object of the wisdom born of reflection. But in order to gain the wisdom born of reflection, first you have to gain the wisdom born of learning. So those are essential prerequisites for becoming the bodhisattva who has achieved the path of preparation. So that's essentially, once you reach the path of preparation, you reach the point where you are developing the wisdom born of meditation, third of those three main kinds of wisdom.
다드네 야나 세제네스 제이가 세제네스 시부터 이제 통유스 이야기
그렇죠.
다데 시부터 그때 농가들이 또 그리스
그렇죠.
다중세 고수디 뭐도 그리갈라들이 그야로
그렇죠.
또 미주티다 아니 이거 그냥 무슨다 그래서 다지당 무슨 그야로 통유다 무슨 재면을 내가 다디 어디 지단디
So the commentary has maybe it comes from another Indian source that interprets the word scripture and reasoning in a slightly different way. And so Gesab says another interpretation of investigating by means of scripture and reasoning can be understood in terms of the three categories of epistemological objects. So among the epistemological objects, there are those which are seen objects. Seen means those objects that can be perceived. And there are unseen objects. This is an ancient Indian term. Things which can be seen means things that can be perceived or realized by ordinary persons. Things which are unseen means things which ordinary persons cannot comprehend on their own. So then in the literature, then those two main categories are further subdivided. Seen things means things that are accessible to our understanding can be divided into the seen things which are directly evident and the seen things which are only slightly hidden. Slightly hidden means things that we can perceive through reason. Things, impermanence, selflessness, and emptiness are things that we do not directly perceive, obviously, but we can gain knowledge of. So they are hidden, but slightly hidden, meaning they're accessible to us through our reasoning powers. The third category is the things that are extremely hidden. Extremely hidden means only evident to a Buddha. So there are certain subjects, especially the nature of the subtle workings of karma, for instance, over vast periods of time or over vast distances. Those things are, in an unlimited way, only accessible to a Buddha. So if we want to know anything about those extremely hidden things, we have to rely upon scriptural authority. What the Buddha said about karma, because we cannot verify the truthfulness of all the principles about karma on our own. So that's the way to understand it through scripture. Scripture tells us about extremely hidden things. And then reasoning tells us about things that are slightly hidden. And then Buddha also talked about actually saying that the things that the Buddha explained that are accessible to reasoning ultimately would rely upon experience. Buddhism is a very empirical system. So ultimately it goes back to the nature of observable experience. So those are things which the Buddha talked about, as for example, the five skandhas. And we can examine what the Buddha taught about the five skandhas and determine that there's nothing that he said about the five skandhas from our experience that invalidates what he said. So in that sense, we can validate. So three kinds of analysis of Buddhist teaching. So three kinds of investigation. The second one is that we can investigate what the Buddha said about slightly hidden things like the Four Noble Truths and gain correct inferential understanding about them and verify them that way.
나중에야 중요한 것들을 해주시면 내가 다음에 더 해주시면 나중에 중요한 것 얘네 풍부기 내가 버리 누나와리 동아리 다음에 버리 이게 중요한 이미시이야. 아니 풍부 누나와 인간이 그래서 내가 버리 누나와리 동아리 다음에 버리 그다음 중요한 게 시부가 내가 중요한 동담이 시스케.
So then when we're talking about the aspects of the Four Noble Truths, the Four Noble Truths, especially the first two, are then addressing the nature of samsaric existence, and particularly samsaric existence as represented by our own five skandhas. So when we think of our own five skandhas as a result of prior causes, that's the nature of the truth of suffering. So then the four aspects of the truth of suffering are the method by which we can gain an understanding of the disadvantages of samsaric existence. So the disadvantages of samsaric existence are represented by the fact that our five skandhas are impermanent, especially subtle impermanence, changing from moment to moment. Secondly, our five skandhas are qualified by a condition of a deep condition of unsatisfactoriness, and that needs to be investigated. Then, based on our understanding of impermanence and unsatisfactoriness, then we can further infer that our five skandhas are empty. One of the aspects of Pramanavarttika is empty, but it doesn't mean the emptiness of lack of self-existence. It means the emptiness in the sense that our five skandhas are empty of a real personal self. They operate causally, and that's cause and effect on the level of cause and effect, without the interaction or without the benefit of any personal self. So they're empty. The five skandhas exist void of any personal self, and that's the third one. And then fourthly is the selflessness itself. And so the five skandhas themselves are then qualified by the fact that there is no self that is governing them, which is they are without any governing agent. So all four of these aspects have particular import to them, and each of them represents some aspect of the truth of suffering, and what we need to investigate primarily through reason. So in the Pramanavarttika in particular, when it's talking about the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, the way it describes impermanence is to say that impermanence is a Rengal means something which is Rengal means that it occurs at certain times and not at other times. So it is, in a sense, something that is conditioned. If the cause is, Rengal doesn't mean conditioned, literally. Rengal means that it occurs at certain times. Sorry? The term Rengal The basic meaning of it is that it's occasional. Yeah, that's a good word. Okay, so it's occasional. It means occasional in the sense that it is governed by causes. If the causes that, if the correct combination of causes converge, then each of the elements of the five skandhas will in fact arise. In their absence, they will not. Any particular experience. So suffering is that way. Suffering is something that is occasioned, occasional, and occasioned, you can even say. And in past tense form, it also suggests that the causal side of it. And also it means dependent, in the sense that, for instance, it's not only, further investigation it reveals that this term occasional is not limited to impermanent things even. For example, there is an element of space in relation to a pot. Then that means that empty space in the interior of the pot. So that empty space in the interior of the pot, which is the space that is defined by the pot, only exists. That aspect of space only exists if the pot exists. So even uncaused things can be occasional in a more specific way. But we're talking about very speaking technically about the use of terminology.
That is
So now that we're getting into the meat of things, we're going to stop. So we'll but however, so if you really want to continue, then ask a good question.
Yesterday, Rinpoche mentioned that attachment is a proof for future life. Is that right?
Daからさ、今朝今日はチマトゥピアキフィパナラタクティナラアネからさ、タメバからさ、コワがタメバでチカメセンテンディキフィパタマンデルGigi Shugla, Rinpoche Gigere, Karesna, Kuran, Chabata, Debati, Chabata Jeva, send me the Yovic, just what he done. That Kuran, Dojaki, Nenka, the Gachma Dubiaki, the intimity, Dojak, the Yovati, Latene, and the Gachma, group to be over the Kuran, the Ripati, and Neta, Karal to be honest.
가르치나 차바티 잡에서는 아니 지금 내가 가르치나 다 제도 미지가 지키게 다 제도 미지가 지키게 이제 제가 가르치네 다 제도 미지가 지키게 이제 제가 가르치게 되었으나 이게 제 체험을 이렇게 이제 유행하게 될 세발이지. 이거는 세발이지 이게. 이게 제기 제설이 있으면 이거지 이거는 세발이지. 참지. 이게는 개체 이 그래서 지만이 문제예요. 지만이 문제야. 세발스럽게.
So, in that argument, if you recall, there were several, defining characteristics to it. One is that it was an ordinary person. An ordinary person was on the verge of dying. So, and then an ordinary person on the verge of dying who still was subject to attachment. So what the argument is saying is that an ordinary person who has not perceived selflessness and still has this attachment, has ego, then that person mistakenly, when they are facing death, they have the mistaken notion that their very being, right, as represented by the notion of their ego, you feel the apprehension that ego will be annihilated, will cease to exist once you die. And that apprehension triggers attachment for your continued existence. What continues to exist is not the ego, because there is no ego. But what does exist is your five skandhas. And so what will in fact fulfill the continuation of your being is that your five skandhas should continue to exist. And so you develop attachment for what in fact is your five skandhas. And that attachment guarantees that when your body, when your mind and your body separate, then you will still have a clinging to some continued existence. So that sense of attachment or clinging to continued existence is what will be combined with some karmic seed, will awaken some karmic seed, and ensure that a particular rebirth that as determined by that karma will in fact occur.
Oh, 그냥 다치도 이렇게 풍부다 제일 두고 상대 이거지게 풍부는 세버지게 근데 되게 집에 풍부를 들어 장점이에요.
그렇죠.
풍부를 세버지게 봐. 풍부를 세버지게 그다지 집에 풍부들이 되게 세버지게 집에 풍부들이 장점이자 그다지 뒤지게.
So the mistaken belief in itself, it arises in relation to your five skandhas. So what you're really thinking is when you're thinking, oh, I might cease to exist. What you're really thinking is my five. Think of it that way. But what you're really thinking is, I don't want my five skandhas to stop or to no longer exist. So then that attachment, in effect, ensures that even though your physical, body, your physical aspect is abandoned when your mind and body separate, your mind still exists, and that mind still has a desire for that your existence to continue. And that attachment of desire for continued, in effect, samsaric existence, ensures that your mind continuum will, in fact, become joined, right, to some future type of then samsaric rebirth. The argument centers around that concept, or that view of the nature of samsara and rebirth. So it's the unique argument that argues for the future existence of something based on the special type of mind. Mind that's still subject to desire is the mind that guarantees that it will be succeeded, followed by another consciousness after your death.
I have a quick question. What are the five skandhas that make up our heaps? And I wake up early in the morning thinking I don't want to die all the time. I'm usually at 5 a.m. And I was wondering, how do you get rid of the fear of death and holding on to the five skandhas? And how do you how do you get the higher incarnation to Shambhala instead of just wandering around samsara. Thank you.
Cioè, Yamudere, Marangi to see it. But the Kubo is the Tandagi, Parasite, Yachima to Rani, but it's Kumara, Chair, the Topa, the Chewity Pasoti. Yes, some of yours. I think Marangi is in that. The Shogai, the Jibati, Yoga, Papa, the Yoga. Just anything now. Jibat just be used the Kumungai in a Tamu de la Kumunga de Cadetting. Chip Jordi. And Jordi was the I think Jibat the Komachu Tire, just to the rest. And it's super dealer and the Hawar to Gauchman Kubayana, and it up in a touching the care to take it. Again, down, I didn't get the good style, so to speak. Ani karsa kyo chuma di nyamba mai ba ge thak de tu kan do that de so ronan si he's laughing because it's a tall order.
Really, that's it. Jinati Yapura Chiri, Metaba Changurba, Chua Metabas, Jangure Siriari, Jena Yapuyari, Jena Karini, that share the day, the Tanchi Karini Chichi, yet, on which they were, Yahweh. Jaya Naseti, Chida, Naji, Nurse, Triatis, with the right. Swear from the city, and then I wish you would say that I'm shit on to be take so that you rest into the back and then teaching to see. And I wish the swear from the areas.
So the first point is that impermanence is a topic, a very important topic to use in spiritual practice. One form of impermanence is so-called rough impermanence, which means the impermanence of our mortality, sense that we're going to die. So that's one form of impermanence in practice. So to reflect on one's mortality is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. Its main purpose is to remind us that our lives are uncertain and therefore we should try to make the best use of whatever time we have. So that's kind of the first level at which to meditate on impermanence, is to urge us to make the most of whatever time we are given. That's one point about death, that thinking about death is not a bad thing always. Then in relation to the question, say, well, what are our 5 skandhas that are the object that we become apprehensive about because we think about their being coming to an end. Then there are 5 skandhas, 5 heaps, among which the first is our physical being. And our physical being is the roughest element of our being, and the being that, in fact, we identify with the most, right? We know we have minds and we know we have thoughts, but we are very much attached to our bodies. And so certainly when we die, we know that our body is going to be abandoned. So one way that we fear death is that aspect of our being is going to be lost. That's one way in which the fear is generated. But at any rate, among the 5 skandhas, the remaining 4 are mostly mental. And then they go up the chain from feelings, direct experiential feelings, which are pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, which are the roughest form of our mental aspect. The 3rd skandha is in our conception, which is how we identify our world, how we make order out of our experience and identify things as what they are and determine what the nature of being is and what we make decisions, right and wrong, good and bad, about what our existence consists of, mainly is the judgment and conception that occurs through the third skandha. The fourth skandha is not one mental factor, but it's a combination of all the remaining mental factors, which are basic cognitive mental states, emotional states, both good and bad. The mental fictions are in that. The virtuous mental factors are also in the fourth skandha, skandha of formation. The most important among the fourth skandha is volition. Volition is the essence of karma, the impulse to act in a certain way. And that's where the name for the fourth skandha comes from. The fifth skandha is our awareness, our main element of consciousness, sensory consciousness and mental consciousness. But if we want to take it in a kind of a simpler way, mind and body. So first skandha is our body, the remaining four skandhas are our mind.
that 제가 집 돼야 되는 제국의 추가 된수나 그래서 양가 제야 마지야 변도인들이 상부 제야 변도인들이 단 추가 제니 집과 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 집과에서는 가리네 제외 당만의 집들이 나중에 말이 강도로 친해를 아니 지금 나주주의 생계 지구들도 나 주거 집에 집에 제가도 지금 많이는 이래 말이 강도로 지하기 괜찮은 나도 지구들이 아니 이게 지구전에 필요한데도 지구전에 마치와는 필요해야
Did you put the undercoat?
그런 말이 나한테 지금 이래 그 다른데서는 굶어 지야지 내가 지야지 가기야 거기 지야지 된수나 지레비 강에 대야로 지다 지가 시안은 내가 지야지 지리 내가 썼지 시안은 내가 지리 내가 썼지 시안은 내가 쟤는 라치미를 봐 말이 프랑치 제가 상주 그 라니 기념을 지야 가기를 했어. 저와 같은 거리 아니 시안의 저와 지금 시안의 미도 지금도 지림도 나니 소소는 지와리 친밀의 예선거가 같이들 가르치는 간주지들이 지와리 대행들 지어라 담은 맞추네 저가지야 아니 간시 비심이 상가지야 지구가 지와리를 때니 저는 지와리 뜻이 가지고 지금 해야 되지 지와리 핑계야 말이야 지금 내가 전에 최고야 지금 핑계야 that related sometimes.
This is a subject that is has certain dimensions to it that are very significant. The nature of fear surrounding death. So simply being frightened at the prospect of one's demise is common. It's perhaps everyone is familiar with it, and you experience it to some degree or another. But meditating on impermanence, and meditating on impermanence in the form of death is described as an exercise that it's meant to generate some kind of fear. But it's not that fear. It's not the fear of dying per se. So the fear of dying per se is kind of an impulse. It doesn't really have a lot of, reflection behind it. It's just something that can, we can experience it. One way to think about that fear is just to remind ourselves that death is not a punishment per se. Death is just an inevitability, and it's not something that we alone are subject to. Everybody is subject to death. I mean, if our own death was something that only we had to experience, and everybody else would be able to live as long as they wanted to, then we might be justified in sort of feeling, unfairly, burdened with that consequence. The fact of the matter is, everybody is subject to it. So it doesn't do much good, really, to think about just the fact that that you don't like the idea that you're going to have to die. Moreover, that thinking of generating that kind of fear, in particular, does absolutely nothing to prevent you from dying. Right? You're going to die, whether you fear it or not. Fear it all you want, it's not going to stop it. Number one. But the point of it is that if you think about the nature of fear in a way that it's inevitable, that everyone that's born dies, there should be some sort of that reason, that thought should be something that sort of a little bit palliative. It should have some kind of counter force to that just raw fear that you feel about that. It's part of nature to die. So that's one point. But the real purpose for meditating on death in a positive way as a spiritual exercise, rather than just raw terror about the prospect of death, is that if you reflect about the fact that death is certain, number one, and that we have no idea when it will come, and it may be very soon, then, and if we link with that the idea that our behavior has consequences. So what we do, what we have done, will determine what will follow death. Because the death really is not the end by any means. And so what really is important is that prior to that temporary end, if you like, or the end of this life in particular, is to use this time to do whatever you can to minimize the likelihood that you'll have a bad future life, and to maximize the likelihood that you have a good future life. That's the purpose, really, for meditating on your mortality. And that's something that you can do something about. And the point is that if you reflect on death in that way, in such a way that it affects your behavior and prompts you to engage in a spiritual activities, the effect of doing that is you will become less apprehensive about your death. And you can, in fact, face death peacefully, without fear. So these are points that one can bear in mind. So wait, there's more.
Jampa to sing it come to Jampa to Chicken care the Tirva. That it can just congregate. Rana Kanga Kadis Kasune, Nana Chuba Mari, Sanja Kanga Chinipa, Nova to Suki Kanga to make a show. Shana Kanga Tita Zuma shows Janet Chan Niji Congregate. Yana Rana teacher of Chikar, Kingsune. And a subject amount of teaching to all the things that pass Navayari. Subject to Ishmi Kateto, Cherish me Kateto, Sawavishi me Kateto. That is Kangate the Papa, Gundama Biarva, to Sula, Tiki Mera, Tisula, Tiki, some 아니 나한테 뒤지 뒤지 현재 현재양 뒤지 뒤지 용나 쉬어서 나는 강의 지체인데 현재 빠진데 강의 지체는 무슨 강의 지체는 쉬어서 강의 지체를 쉬어서 근데 지체는 잠바다 저어서 공부를 아니 쉬워 시 되게 잠바다 이제 공부다 아니 정말 그래서 그래 다들 지와 지들과 강연을 지켜야 되니 쉬고 다바리스 감바든지 죽는다 아니 지금 그때가 예스지 아버지 얘기하는 상바산은 사단하는 상스 상바기는 사단하는 예스 상바상부제는 랑이 아버지야리 도세 아버지야리 상바기는 것은 랑제 멤버리 도세 멤버리 진행을 봐 어디스게야리 어디처럼 야불이스
So, it's good. The question that you asked is a good question. Glad that you asked it. So the kind of final point to address what you said is that whenever you think about dying, then that in reaction to that thought, to the recognition that your life is temporary, then you should think, what should I do? So what can I do? I'm not dead. I'm still here. So then what I should do, as long as I'm still alive, is I should cultivate loving kindness and compassion. That's what I can do prior to when I die. That's something that will follow me in my death and subsequent to my death. So how do you do that? So the easiest way to do that, or one very practical and one very easily understood way to apply those spiritual qualities, is that as we get up, as we spend our day, then we encounter various circumstances. Something pleasant might happen to us. So we might have some positive experience. Something good might happen. That's a good day in which we are enjoy ourselves. So when we have that pleasant experience, then we should use that to remind ourselves that throughout this planet, throughout the universe, then there are countless other beings who are not having those happy experiences, who are dying of starvation, who are dying from the heat, who are dying or freezing to death. Not only human beings, but all other kinds of beings as well. And so when you experience some form of happiness or pleasure or well-being, then think to yourself how nice it would be if those other people who don't have that, who are not experiencing what I'm experiencing right now, may they pray, develop the aspiration for at least. May all those other beings who lack the kind of good experience that I'm currently experiencing, may they be able to find it. And then that becomes a trigger for you to develop loving kindness towards others, and try to express it as fully as you can, as widely as you can. And by the same token, then if you have some unfortunate experience, if you experience something painful or some misfortune, then don't just feel miserable, but rather use that as a way to remind yourself that there are countless other people who are also experiencing that same kind of suffering, and maybe much worse than that. And so therefore, tell yourself, I'm not the only one that's experiencing this difficult thing. So may this remind me that of all the other people who have to suffer, and how they're no different from me, and therefore pray that they might be able to be alleviated from whatever suffering they might be having to endure. So that's something that you can do in whatever you encounter in your day-to-day life. And if you do that all the time, then you'll develop those qualities of loving kindness and compassion. And then Lama Tsongkhapa wrote in a poem, he said, Sambasan means, literally means good mind, or it means virtuous mind, and especially then altruistic mind. If you have that kind of mind that thinks about others, and you develop that, sadam lamyam san, then where sa means place, but it means the goal, the destination that you reach. Lam is then the process of your life as you go through time. Both of them will be favorable for you. If you have a good mind, your life will go more easily, more smoothly, and the destination that you reach will be one that is more favorable for you. And said the opposite as well. If your attitude is harmful or inferior, then you're going to have more and more difficulties, and the place you end up is going to be not so good. So, in short, then this is a kind of instruction or explanation how to live, how to think, and if you cultivate those two attitudes, the benefit of doing so, specifically in relation to the question that you raised, is that when you actually come to the end of this life, you won't have any fear about the fact that you're dying, because you will feel confident that what will come after this life will be at least as good, if not better, than this life has been. And so you won't have any need or reason. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.